Welcome to the Unlist. Today we'll be having a brief discussion on Absolu Aventus by Creed, released in 2023. So I've already done a written review on this and I've done a 60-second short, so if you'd rather prefer those formats, go have at it. My written review is on my WordPress. Later it'll be on base notes. A 60-second review is already up on this channel. Go check it out to get just the facts and my quick 2 cents. This is kind of like the let's talk about it video where I get really in the weeds on what I think this fragrance really means for the house. So 3 things we're going to cover. What is this? What does it smell like? And then of course, what I think this means overall for the House of Creed, like what this portends, if you will. Now, first things first, Absolu Aventus is a flanker to Aventus. That's kind of obvious with the name. If you're like me and live under a rock and dress terribly and have no social life, then you are probably the first person to know about this because you're just on the internet, right? As soon as it dropped, you knew about it. That's what it was with me. Now, this is a very limited flanker, though. This is not like Aventus Cologne where it's going to stay around. This is a one batch only, what I call a one and done. Typically, one and dones are more for the artisanal indie perfumer brands because they have a limited economy of scale to begin with. So a Regional Door and brands like that will do a single batch because that's all they can make of that fragrance, right? It's all they have available to do, make one batch. But Creed does one batch fragrances for entirely different motivations. Usually they're celebrating a special occasion. A store wants an exclusive of some kind. Some other organization wants an exclusive of some kind. Or they just want to stoke the fires because Creed is notorious for stoking the fires of their own fan base. They know that there is a very large portion of their fan base that will buy everything. Especially if you tell them it's only going to have this many bottles and you better act fast. Creed has some of the most psychotic, obsessed fans of any fragrance brand in the world. And those fans seem to have endless pocketbooks too. There's no lengths to which they will not go to get a limited, especially limited Creed fragrance. And Creed knows that. So they pull their strings like puppets, okay? And that's how they make a lot of their money. And they have done many of these one batch fragrances. Most of them until recent years were actually not even bottled. They were flacken only. So you had to be that extra special kind of Creed devotee and go fly out to Paris or one of their other boutiques or to the Harrods, perfume floor where they have their counter up there to get these and get them put into like a little sprayer for you. Scent of Auger was done that way. Amalfi Flowers was done that way. There are a lot of these, okay? Les Floriles was done that way. They later put that in a bottle and they renamed it as Floriles without the last part when it went into the bottle. Then there's a lot of these ones that were actually one batches, but they came out as bottles first. Stuff like Royal Delight was put in a bottle, but it was a one batch fragrance. That stuck around for a little while because it wasn't popular, okay? Another one is Royal Service, also got a bottle. It was a bottled product, but it was a one batch only. Numbered, actually. Each bottle was numbered. And then, of course, most recently, and the Aventus guys typically know this one because it's around the same time period, but Millésime 1849. Millésime 1849 was a one batch fragrance as well, and it was released one and done, and it was a celebration of some sort. It was, I think, an exclusive Harrods fragrance as well because it had the Harrods green was on the bottle. So Scent of Auger was an exclusive to Harrods, and so was Millésime 1849. But these are all one batch fragrances. Collectors go nuts for them. Absolu Aventus is really no different in that regard. It's just another one of these jump through hoops to get it because you don't want to be left out. You are the ultimate Creed fan, and you got to have everything, okay? And that's who this appeals to. Now, what does this smell like? Well, perhaps the most important question. This just smells like the thicker, richer, somewhat redundant cousin to the original, and I mean the original like 2010, 2012 batch of Aventus. So this is significantly smokier. This is significantly smokier than modern Aventus, okay? So if you're that old school I was there when they were in square 4-ounce bottles. If you're that guy, you might actually like this because this has got more birch in it. It's a little smokier. However, it is not significantly different from any other Aventus you ever smelled. Even those older bottles or newer bottles that are a little less smoky, a little more pineapple. This still very much smells like Aventus. See, Aventus cologne was a departure. I actually appreciate that because it was a true flanker. It did something different with the DNA, right? In the same way that Viking cologne did something different with Viking. Now, I wasn't really keen on the idea of Creed having flankers to begin with. Creed has never been a house of flankers, but if they're going to do a flanker, they at least do it right. And I will say they have actually understood the assignment on what a flanker should be, and they have done the cologne flankers correctly. So like them or hate them, they are correct in the way they are executed. Now this, not so much. So what you get here is a thicker, richer, a little bit smokier take on Aventus. And they achieve that by darkening up the opening. There's black currant in here, which black currant bud is a favorite note of mine, so I actually appreciate that being in here. I like the black currant. But make no mistake, the pineapple is still here. It may not be listed in the note pyramid, but if you smell allyl amyl glycolate in isolation like I have, you know what it is. Just like the hydromercenol and kalone. You smell them in isolation, you get familiar with them, they stick out like a sore thumb in perfumes. And Pierre Bourdon was very, very into the hydromercenol, very, very into kalone, and also very, very into using allyl amyl glycolate. He used it in Full Choke for Francesco Smalto. He used it in Cabaret de Grey Homme, okay? And then he would use it again in an unfinished fragrance that would later be completed by another perfumer as Aventus. So that allyl amyl glycolate pineapple top note is very much alive and well in this Absolu Aventus, even though it's not listed in the note pyramid. Now, the heart notes, they're a little more different than the top is from the original. The heart gets a little bit more of a dry spice quality, but I see this more as Creed sees a lot of other brands, like Bleu de Chanel has pink pepper in it, Zara Wanted played with ginger, okay? A lot of fragrances deal with coriander, so, or cardamom, depending, switch in, switch out, but those kind of drier spices, we're not talking like full cayenne pepper levels of spice here, okay? We're not talking like eau de bas, where it's like red hot pepper. It's not that kind of spice. So we have that in the heart of Absolu Aventus. In fact, we've got ginger, we've got cardamom, and we got pink pepper, all three together. Tiny bit of cinnamon is in here, but the cinnamon is not like Z14, okay? It's not going to be that really noticeable cinnamon, okay? And there's no clove in here. You're not going to get a lot of eugenol in here. Maybe a little bit, but not that much. Mostly, the spices just thicken up the broth. It's like putting cornstarch, in your gravy to make it thicker. It's what the spices do here. They thicken up the heart, which is still going to have your apple notes, still going to have your vanilla, your geranium, your patchouli, okay, all that good stuff is going to be in there. A little bit of jasmine, okay. Then you move into the base. The base is also very familiar to what you know of Aventus. So you're getting patchouli, getting sandalwood, you're getting ambroxan, okay, you're getting vanilla, getting labdanum, all right. The key difference is how they are re-equalized. So Absolu Aventus has more labdanum, more musk, more sandalwood. So it's not as green in the base, all right? It's thicker and richer and creamier and muskier. And the first thing it's going to remind you of is something like Hachivat by Michonnet. It's going to remind you of 19 Degree by Toomey, if you've smelled it. It's going to remind you of Orion by Tiziana Terenzi. It's going to remind you of all these other fragrances that are not Creed fragrances. It's going to remind you of Cedrat Bois Intense, okay? So that ultimately brings me to the conclusion that you don't need this fragrance because what you are getting is a Creed fragrance that is super limited and vastly overpriced. $600 for 75 ml and you are getting Creed's version of its own imitators. So it is looking at its own imitators, and it is imitating its own imitators. That is just what? That's mind blown like this. You're going to pay a brand $600 for hubris, okay? It is taking its imitators and holding up a mirror to them and then charging you $600 for it. Ridiculous, okay? Collectors only, hobbyists only, hardcore obsessives only. Any kind of reasonable-minded person is going to smell this and go, no, I can just wear Hachivat, I can just wear Orion, I can wear 19 Degree, I can wear whatever. I don't need it. Ced Drapois Intense, I don't need this. Okay. Now, what this means for Creed, where we're going to wrap this up. Not a very long video, like I said. This is a canary in the coal mine. Because what this is telling me is that a lot of these brands now are relying on this sort of using the hardcore minority subset of their fan base as an unwitting focus group in order to pitch a fragrance more largely towards the mainstream. Because it costs money to hire people to come in and test your fragrances. Real focus groups, real consumer testing is usually paid, right? So this is a canary in the coal mine because this is Creed going back to what Chanel tried doing in the 80s. When Chanel did a soft launch of Bois Noir, New York, Paris, Tokyo only, and they let everyone buy those bottles, and there was a limited number of them. They took the feedback from the salespeople, they saw how it came back, made their fixes, and then 2 years later, 3 years later, boom, here comes Egoist. Okay? So that's what we're seeing happen now. All right? Sometimes these one-and-done batches, like Millésime 1849, were just alternate mods for a brief that were not used. Like Royal Oud and Millésime smell very similar to each other. Millésime's a little more floral though. So suspicion says that they came from the same assignment, but one was the mainstream release and one was kind of like, okay, we have this. Let's go ahead and do 10,000 bottles just to see what it does, right? There you go. So this fragrance, however, is definitely more of a, we don't want to take a big risk by making another Viking that is not that well loved. We don't want to do another Himalaya, again, not that well loved, right? So we don't want to take that kind of a risk, so we're going to do a soft launch. We're going to do a small one-batch fragrance. We're going to test the waters, see how crazy people get. And if they get really crazy, then maybe we'll take some parts of it and upcycle them into another fragrance, okay? We've already seen that. We've seen Creed Windsor get upcycled into the main launch of Royal Mayfair. We've already seen it, okay? We've seen elements of past Creed fragrances get upcycled into more recent ones. It's one of the biggest things they are notorious for doing. If they're not outright copying another brand, right? Clearly, Original Santal was Individuel, so on and so forth. But they will oftentimes plagiarize themselves as well as other brands. And when they are not sure, they will release it as either a luxury collection. They will put it in, the high-end collection, make it cost $575 or whatever, like they do with Jardin d'Amalfi, stuff like that. Jardin d'Amalfi is actually Amalfi flowers back from the dead, right? That got upcycled. Or they do the one-batch thing. They put out the one batch, see how it does, find out what people like and what they don't like, take the things that people like, put them into a new fragrance, get rid of the things they don't. That's how Windsor became Royal Mayfair. So the canary in the coal mine here is that Absolu Aventus is Creed going, we don't want to pay for a focus group. We don't want to pay for consumer testing, for proper consumer testing. So we're going to take this fragrance and we're going to do a limited one-batch launch and see how it pans out. And then take notes and then make another fragrance, okay? And that is a thing that we may see a lot of the industry doing. Tom Ford's already done it, guys. Tom Ford takes their private blends all the time and brings them down to the standard lines. We've already seen Beau de Jour come down. We've seen Costa Azura, come down, okay? Ombre leather, it's come down, okay? It's very common for them. They take the better selling private blends and turn them into the mainline releases. So this whole idea of making a limited edition fragrance to test the waters, and if it does well, then you can rename it, you can change something, you can rebrand it as something else and sell it more widespread. That's where we are going with the industry, sadly. And we are looking at stuff like Absolu Aventus as one of the higher profile examples of it, okay? One of the higher profile examples of a brand not wanting to pay labor to consumer test, to focus group, to mood board, if you will, right? So they'd rather just make it, but make it really expensive, make it really exclusive, watch people jump through hoops for it, and then decide should they continue and make a full launch, okay? So I'm not going to cast aspersions and say that's a bad idea or say that it's unethical, because honestly, it's business at that point. If you can make a limited launch fragrance that smells terrible and everyone buys it anyway, you've still made money. So, and it's a fragrance. We're not talking food or drugs here, okay, or cars with recalls on them. So it's just perfume. So not really an ethical quandary. It's a little bit stinky, a little bit dirty, yeah. It's a little bit underhanded, but it's not really an ethical quandary. So that's it, guys. Absolu Aventus, that's my opinion on it. Take it to the bank or walk away. I don't care. And hope you guys enjoyed the video. Not a long video. Catch you next time.